So, welcome
Happy New
everybody.
Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to everyone.
Yes. So I'm glad so you could act upon a couple of minutes. You are adaptable species. You know, humans are adaptable species. Can you hear me well, by the way, or no?
Oh, you sound great.
Fine.
Okay, because I have a microphone here, you see.
Yeah.
Oh,
I see. Oh, that's very good. I'm not using
very
the
helpful.
microphone, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
By the way, I'm in Miami, Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking from Florida.
Why are you in Miami? Nenad? What's a vacation?
It's one of the first vacations in 20 years, but a little bit ping pong, Parkinson, a little bit vacation, and I'm
Nice.
my daughter and son-in-law and my wife here. So,
Beautiful.
and I'll go and visit one of the ping pong Parkinson possibilities here. And Cuba is close. By the way, I just got a call from president of the Table Tennis Association of Cuba. He invited me to visit Cuba.
Wonderful.
Well, David Amram has contacts with Cuba over the years, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I've been there. I was there before. I never went, but I knew musicians and people from there were a good part of my life. And then when Fidel Castro first came to New York City, we thought he was Robin Hood. We all went out to Central Park. And then when he was disinvited from the White House and the government went out of their way to do everything to disgrace him, he went up to Harlem to the hotel and shocked everyone by having chickens and stuff in the hotel that he could cook and chop up and eat. And the St. Teresa, I used to play in the basement there at an after hours place, lucky enough. And it was kind of amazing. And then when he went back, I had relatives who had loved him when he first came. And after about a year, they said, man, we can't handle this. So they left and came here. And I was lucky enough, 1977, to go with Dizzy Gillespie, Stan Getz, Earl Hines, as what they call embajadores de ben voluntad, goodwill ambassadors, because of Jimmy Carter, who wanted to say they could open the door and let 4 American capitalists of lesser means go down there, not to have some big political meeting and scream, but to play music together. We're 90 miles away. Afro-Cuban music has nothing to do with capitalism or communism, and neither does jazz, and neither does any other art form of expression. That has to do with human beings. And I still had relatives there, most of whom have left since then. But our job was not to go down there and examine the government, but rather just to play music. And it was historic, not because of who we were, but because of the fact that Americans were playing there. It was very exciting. And we had a great time. And they wanted to make a film, which they couldn't do, but someone gave me the soundtrack. And I actually gave the record, Havana, New York, live in Havana, with Paquito de Rivera and Arturo Sandoval playing, who managed to escape from Cuba and become American citizens. But before that, we were playing there. And then, of course, I saw them when they were here as well. And then I made some recordings here. And when some of the people from Cuba came, Los Papinas, they invited me to play with them on the street, just as I had invited them to play when I was in their country.
Which year was that?
And sort of had a big close down. So for 49 years or whatever.
David, was that 1977?
1977.
Year, 1977.
And now, all these years later, 2 years ago, I guess it was, I was invited back after 49 years or whatever it was,
God,
to go back to the Jazz Festival. And the first thing I did was to call up Paquito de Rivera and apologize to him and say, I know what a hard time your family had to come over here, what a hard time you had. And I said, I'm not going down there to try to overthrow our government or do any of that stuff. I'm just going there because I want to see and be with the musicians still alive, and I love the music. And he said, well, I appreciate your understanding how I feel. And he said, I just hope you can go back and see what's left of Cuba. Because like the United States, which I love too, they also have some real serious problems. And hopefully they'll solve them. Hopefully we'll solve ours. So I went back again a second time and I loved it. And at the same time, I know there's a lot of people there really suffering. The average salary is $20 a month. People are scuffling. And because the Russians no longer could afford to make that the workers' paradise showcase, and the United States was hoping, I guess, our government, we could starve everybody into opening up McDonald's and fast food franchises. They already love and play, have great baseball players and great athletes and people who love our culture, our music, our sports, and us, but they don't really need us to tell them who they are or what to do. And conversely, I don't believe that we have to feel wrong about how what we have, and if we don't like it here, at least we can complain about it without going to jail so far. But what I interesting thing was when I met so many young people there, they said, you know, man, we have friends that went to the United States. We listen to the music. We'd love to go there and visit, but we want to stay here as long as we can. We love our country. We love our culture. We love our families, and we love being here. So we're going to stay as long as we can and hope it gets better. And what happened in the meantime was that there was this wonderful feeling of being together. And as a musician, being with people of all ages, Bobby Cascaras, who's in his 90s, who's like a genius, could be a zillionaire, and he's staying there to teach the next two generations about that music and that those cultures. There's so many. There's such a rich culture. And my hope is that eventually all the governments will be more addressing themselves towards people. Because the interesting thing, just to be offensive to everybody, is that I was told by these young people, you know, we respect the fact that you have your own way, but you said if you don't watch out, you're going to be the way we are right now. Because they saw that the current administration at that time, which was 2 years ago, was also going to become a benevolent dictatorship. And they saw that coming. So while they didn't like Castro particularly, they also didn't like Trump. And I said, well, you know, I don't care for Mr. Trump, but we have a free, if people want to, you know, God bless him. I don't hate the people that support him. And I love America and this country. And I don't particularly care for what happened to Cuba, but we were partly responsible for that too. You know, when we had to sign a paper saying we were going to show the people of Cuba how they could be free. Well, they had enough gifts for us when we tried to bomb them off the face of the earth, and with the Bay of Pigs and failed when they tried to assassinate Castro with the exploding cigar. To make a long story short, both I think Cuba and the United States deserve to have a freer society than we do. We have a free society, and I can talk to you guys so I can do this without somebody coming and knocking on my door and taking me to jail. And that's something that's very precious. And I think rather than criticizing other countries for their shortcomings of civil liberties and all that stuff, we should really think about this country of ours and have compassion and understanding for all our fellow citizens here, even if they think completely on the opposite side, to respectfully disagree with them, but still be able to give them a hug and a handshake and realize that we're all living here together. We're all connected. And whether we love each other or not, we got to be cool and have
Yeah.
to. And that's why it's so nice to be in music because you transcend all that disgusting, sick behavior and celebrate the human spirit, which has nothing to do with politics, race, sex, money, attractiveness, fame,
Mm.
or anything else. And what Nemeth does with the ping pong shows not only people who have Parkinson's disease that they are human beings, and it also shows the rest of the world that we can't just say, oh, and put a brand on them the way we brand one another as being subhuman or non-human or invisible. And that goes not just for people with Parkinson's disease, but just about everybody. So we just have to learn to love each other again. And that starts out, and then I'll be quiet, by forgiving yourself, the hardest thing in the world, not hating yourself or feeling that you're any better or worse than any other citizen of the planet. And until we get people from outer space to land here and talk to us, or Bigfoot shows up and gives us a lecture, we're all the same species and we got to get along whether we dig each other or not. And music is the best way because you can get anybody in the world that if they sing together and play together, they'll suddenly be together for that moment. And that's the start of having some kind of a civilization that we dream of. You can't make any fast money off of that. And there's more money to be made by getting people fighting and hating each other and choosing sides than there is to getting people together and appreciating each other. But I can't see any other way to go except for that. And that's what music has taught me. That's why people who feel that way are very dangerous because they don't help out the economy, but they help out the life and the humanity. So that's why I come on your program, Nemeth, because what you're doing, rather than saying, I have a cure and for $200,000 you can get better, of course, not being a cure, but ripping people off. That's one way to treat a situation. And the other way is we are victims by a rotten society and try to make people feel so guilty that they'll give some organization money, which is then stolen. All of those ways of doing stuff end up being crooked and destructive and worthless. What you're doing, just meaning people can play ping pong together and help themselves out and show all the rest of us we can help one another out by addressing each other rather than pretending it's not happening or abusing people. It's just wonderful. It's a very, very healthy thing in a very unhealthy time. And thank you for what you're doing. And a lot of us appreciate it. Someone said, I just saw an article about famous people with that known because of their hat. Can you think of any? I said, well, I met Nenad Bach. Third week he came to New York quite a while ago, and he had this hat on, but I don't think he's great because of his hat. I think he's great the way I thought he was when I met him because of his spirit and what I knew he would do. And he's been proving that over the years as a musician and trying to bring the world together through music. And now with the Ping Pong Parkinsons, his new nickname is the King Kong of Ping Pong because he's showing all of us how to behave like a human being.
Well,
Is that coined here? Have you ever heard that until now? Nenad, the King Kong of ping
no,
pong?
that's David's.
That's David.
That's David trademark.
But I figure I always say he's known as, that's the revisionist history, which is,
Yeah.
if it didn't happen that way, it should have.
So music and death are big equalizers, basically. Music and death. Music is equalizing. People love the music all over the world. So all the barriers are down, all the walls are down. Once the music starts, all the differences are out of the window, as death is, of course. Like nobody escapes it.
No.
You know, it was beautiful when one of those wonderful videos when you're there with a symphony, and as you know, I write and conduct symphony music mostly. And do everything else because I love doing it. But that's really been my my goal and end in life. And lots of times musicians are doing something called what's called a pops concert, and you could just see the look on their face. I should have gone to dental school. I'm a real estate broker. I didn't go into all this and buy an instrument and spend my life learning how to play it and a lifetime learning how to pay for the Stradivarius in order just to play whole notes with someone singing out of tune. When you were performing and I was watching the orchestra, I was
Right.
watching their faces, they were digging it because they
Yeah.
hear something happening. And you
Yes.
can't fool your partner, you can't fool farmers, you can't fool your
Yeah.
kids, and you
Yeah.
can never fool the band. So the fact that they felt that way is because I think musicians know what's the real deal,
Real deal. Yeah.
what's funny.
They, they,
The-
they,
And music is all about finding the real deal, whatever kind of music, all over the world, Asian, African, European, USA, Canada, South America, any place you go, the music from the heart always has that feeling, and you can just look and see and hear somebody right away, man. You know if there's something happening, and that's a very good thing. That's very healthy, and it brings people together.
yes. It's equalizer. We are equal when we listen.
Oh yeah,
When we play, we're equal.
and it's nothing to do with the way it's been franchised and merchandised. That's why the record industry collapsed because they tried to make it as if they were selling uh,
Anything else?
fast food
Empty tapes.
beside it, or cars with bad carburetors. You know that idea of they'll never know the difference. Take that junk. You know that, and because essentially they feel that whatever it is junk, and therefore it's going to go in the junk heap, so the next load of junk can come in. True music from the heart is built to last, has an exquisite choice of notes and a purity of intent. And that's just for all music that's really beautiful, not just jazz, not just rock, not just folk. It doesn't matter what the genre is. It doesn't even matter what the branding is. Because Richie Havens told me, he said, you know, after Woodstock, suddenly instead of just playing in the little coffee houses, I became a known entity around the world because of a song I didn't even want to sing and I made up because I had to go on 5 hours before I was going to go on. And he said, my first gig was at a folk festival. He said, I'm not a folk musician. Then I was called for a jazz festival. I'm not a jazz musician. And he said, all those different festivals. Finally, he said, at this point, when I get booked now, it's as Richie Havens. Richie has his own entity. And when I did a program recently about Leonard Cohen, they were analyzing him. They said, well, Mr. Amram, you were with New York Philharmonic's composer in residence. You've written operas, symphonies, blah, blah, blah. What do you feel about Leonard Cohen? He only started in his 30s. He had a 1 octave range, and he didn't really write complicated music and this and that. In other words, I realized they were hiring me so I would be Mr. Hatred and criticize him for being some kind of a barbarian. I said, well, he was so extraordinary in what he did. In that 1 octave range, he did more than most people could do with the 5 octave range. Secondly, his poetry was magnificent. And third of all, his melodies and songs, which are so deceptively simple, are so beautiful. And when you study them, so subtle and so well written, he defies categorization. I would define him as Leonard Cohen. And I think that goes with anybody and everybody and all musics that are real. You just judge them for what they are, not what they're called or the branding. And in the record stores, they used to have slots, different kinds of things. That's why I made that No More Walls record way back in 1971. where I had my symphony music and jazz, not and world music from around the world before they called it world music, not all being one big mush slop pit, a melting pot, a grueling pot of nothing, but just each one with respect and love and understanding that these were great cultures that I was lucky enough to be privy to. And as a kindergarten level, I was able to incorporate some of that into what I did. And then in my classical pieces where everything was written down, that was a chance of putting it down on paper so other musicians could express themselves through what was written on the paper. And I'm happy to say that all these years later, they have college courses now called No More Walls, not just about music, but about anything. It doesn't mean everything is the same or it has to be one big slop pit, the philosophy of whatever, but rather the various kinds of beauty which we find every morning if we get up and look out the window and see the clouds in the sky and the trees and hear the birds, feel the wind. That's that's the best art ever created. And that's a gift that we're given by some force that we don't even understand. And music reflects that in some way. And the true music, the stuff that touches your heart, that is something that you also don't understand, but you revere it in the same way that you do other things that are really important and powerful in life.
Beauty
So,
matters.
on that note, I will be quiet and ask you and Michael to say some stuff. And just for all your friends around the world, we're so happy that you're seeing us, and we wish we were with you and with the magic of this technology is possible. And we hope you'll know that what Nenad's doing with the Ping Pong Parkinson's and what Michael Spudik does in writing about music and encouraging young creative singer-songwriters not to give up, but to try to pursue what they're doing. And what I'm hoping to do in my little way, all is for we have more of a world view, and we all share a hope that we can help in a tiny way to bring the world or some people together. And for those of you who see the news, I think we're much better than we appear to be, according to what television says. We're the wretched slime that we are, according to watching the network news and those programs. I only say that because I think a lot of people that when I recently went to Europe and when I was in Asia and South America, they kind of look and say, man, aren't you scared living in your country or what's happening? Well, what's happening is what always happens. Volcanoes erupt sometimes, but then the lava cools down and something new happens. So this is a very exciting time. And I think it's going to be a good time. It's going to be a good new year. And since we have more prisons, as well as more landfills than any other country in the world, perhaps some of the people who've been responsible for incarcerating our minds will have a chance to get some rehabilitation. That's what prison's supposed to be, not punishment. It's time to rehabilitate those who were lucky enough to have power and misused it.
David, I always appreciate your high level, and thanks always for your positivity. I just want to reflect on what you're saying about support to young, to songwriters. A lot of the work involves composers as well, and
Yeah.
I'm also with you totally, and with Nenad, to break down these barriers. And I'm more on that side of the wall that's always been there with the classical, but I'm always thinking like you, that why is this barrier there and how much harm is done traditionally, and how your life and everything that you've done with your music has tried to break down that wall, going back all the way back, the Philharmonic days when you were the composer in residence, like
No.
a noble thing to challenge like these society people,
Well,
not
see,
stomach you mentioning Beethoven and Monk and, putting everything together, like what's good, in music is what's worthy, what's authentic. And it's not about these traditional like mind prisons of, it's just terrible. And so, I mean, I appreciate so much that you've challenged like authority at the, the highest level or the toughest, because, culture comes down to us over centuries of, and it's all, this baggage is there. And we're living suddenly in this age where it's being torn asunder, it's being challenged. And here you are, 91, is it?
So far.
Nonagenarian, and you're still emerging, as a composer, as you put it. You're still an emerging composer because you still have to contribute. And so I guess my big question is like into the future now. You've seen it all. You've seen the changes. Are you optimistic about these next years and what we're going through?
Very, because I see, I never wanted to tear down. I mean, I did in my fantasies, but getting violent or feeling guilty or any of those things, all of that stuff is a self-indulgence and a waste of time. And you're only playing into people's hands by doing that. So I called the record No More Walls, not tear down the walls. I said, no more walls. The reason being, once you take that out of your mind, then you're free to appreciate what's beautiful. I met so many people who loved all kinds of music, but the lesson that I learned of snobism, which is a mental illness that can do not only the person who's snobbish in, but do anybody else in who's a victim of their snobbish bad behavior, was when I was a second busboy at the Opera House in Nantucket at the age of 20. And those of you who ever worked in restaurants know that the Austro-Hungarian Empire had a servants class. Haydn was the first servant that was able not to have to work in the kitchen, have a full-time gig as a composer. Up until that time, there was the heavy servants. And if you've worked in a big-time restaurant, there's the owners, of course, that show up. Maybe they'll sit at your table to say hello. That's supposed to be a great honor. Then they have the concierge, then they have the doorman, then they have the head waiter, then they have the waiters, then they have the busboys, and finally the second busboy is at the very bottom. And if you don't believe it, when they divide up the tips, go through the different graphs of whatever it is, the second busboy is what you would call on minimal level economically. So I was the second busboy, but I was having such a good time being in that beautiful place with the wonderful young woman I was with at that time, and hearing a fantastic pianist who was the king of what in 1951 was a big gig, which was playing hotel piano. So in the wintertime, he would play at all the big hotels, and in the summer, he played sort of cocktail music and that kind of stuff. And he was one of those guys who could play all the tunes, and he had a fake English accent and a beautiful tweed coat with patches on his sleeve, and was very suave to all the people who came in, from the most socially prominent to the most gross, who were able to afford a big boat to come there and come to Nantucket and eat an expensive meal. After a month, I had on my little busboy's outfit, and I said, "Sir, I want to be a musician someday. I've been working at it since I was a kid. I was brought up on a farm, and here I am, Nantucket, and it's just such a thrill to hear you play every night." And he looked at me, sort of gave me an icy stare like, "I don't need your compliments." But I didn't understand it was time for me to shut up. So I said, "But if I may ask you, please, my favorite song of all time was called I'm Coming Virginia. I heard Bix Beiderbecke play that. I memorized the solo, and that's what made me see, when I was 10 years old, the relationship of the Brandenburg Concerto with that great trumpet solo and the harmonies and the counterpoint, and then hearing Bix Beiderbecke play a solo over the harmonies, the counterpoint that Bach had written. I began to feel what music was about. I said, "Do you ever play that song?" And he looked at me and said, I don't accept requests from the second busboy.
Ooh.
Bam! And I said, and that was a wonderful experience because I realized that's the way some people think of everything and everybody. And first of all, I better get used to that because it certainly would happen again. And secondly, I better never, ever dare to be that way for the rest of my life to anybody who addressed me. It was a good experience, but that kind of reflected how the guy was brought up to behave. And at the same time, I'm sure in looking it over, he probably felt, well, here I am playing in hotels and I should be at Carnegie Hall as a soloist with the New York Philharmonic. He probably had some dreams that he didn't achieve, or he would have been happy being a great hotel pianist and having a gig in music rather than having to work in a dry cleaning store or a gas station.
Mhm.
All that being said, those attitudes are things that every people in the world are brought up with, including people that think if you like country music, you can't appreciate jazz, or if you appreciate jazz, you can't appreciate country music, or if you like symphony music, you can't enjoy any music. If you read music, you can't be as creative as people that just play on the spot. That if you're an improviser, you can't write anything down. If you do, you're going to lose your creativity. If you don't know how to write music down, you're a moron no matter what you do. All of those attitudes of who, what, where, why are you not, that's irrelevant because the music it's about the music, and the music is already there in the universe and been here by gifts to us, and all the people who created that wonderful music are now a gift that we have to share just by being able to hear it, and therefore we're part of something larger than us and something that could keep us humble, and something that if we decide to do it, we can never get it right. And rather than feel that you're a failure, you don't think about success or failure. You think about, can I get better? So when I hear people criticizing Wynton Marsalis, who's a fantastic educator, composer, player, everything, and I knew him since he was in high school. And when I was conducting the Brooklyn Philharmonic and he came and played the Haydn trumpet concerto, it was incredible. So someone said, well, he's no Freddie Hubbard. I said, well, he doesn't have to be. He's Wynton Marsalis. He plays himself. And they were whining and saying this and that. I said, well, if I could play the French horn as well as he's played the trumpet, I'd be stuck up. So I think if you don't appreciate him, you should go home and practice.
David, what got you involved with the French horn as an instrument? And even to back up a little further, what was it about the orchestra that possessed you? Were you a child already? And
Yeah, well,
Before you answer,
my uncle was a merchant.
before you answer, David, I think that everybody should be a second busboy. For
yes, or second violin, right?
that's the best education. It's the best fundamental education.
The idea of the second, right? I never thought of it. You're right. And my gosh, that's brilliant. I'll have to remember that. No, the thing was my uncle took me to hear the Philadelphia Orchestra and
How
Leopold.
old were you? How old were you?
I was 6.5 years old.
Wow.
I was already getting up there in years. 91's even farther on the speedometer, but it's all in geologic time. It's all pretty relative. Anyway, here was Leopold Stokowski, who was not only the king of of symphonic music at that time with the then the spectacular orchestra. He was also the equivalent of what we would have today as a mega rock and roll star because he'd been in a Technicolor featured Walt Disney movie called Fantasia, which was shown all over the world. And there he was conducting and talking and smiling. And so Mr. Big, Mr. Superstar, instead of having a 20-year-old Exxon grant composer who would say, well, we'll throw them the kids' concert as a crumb so they can learn how to conduct, and having some person get out who was trained to think, I hope I never have to do this again and be with all these kids. I want to be the head of a big orchestra. This is just a stepping stone. I can't stand it, and it's not anybody's fault. That's the way we would train very gifted people into already committing psychic, mental, soulful, spiritual suicide before they even get started by putting in that horrible mind trap. Here we had Mr. Big himself conducting the concert, all dressed up in his afternoon finery, which is a frock coat and a special vest that the old time conductors would wear if they were doing a matinee for the matinee audience. And you could see Stokowski was having such a good time. And I remember they did Peter and the Wolf, and they had a gigantic police dog that was on stage. And when they had the wolf and they had the wolf music played by those great Mason Jones and all those great horn players. And then, no, I guess that's before Mason came, I guess, but I remember how great that was. And then Mr. Kincaid, who was a superstar of the flute, played the famous flute solo, and Stokowski showed us kids, this is what Prokofiev, the composer, had for the bird, and he's played that fantastic flute. The police dog went, and the audience cheered, and Stokowski laughed and enjoyed it. And 40 years later, I was writing a piece for the American Symphony Orchestra that Stokowski's orchestra, they had commissioned me to write this piece. And I met he said, did you ever see me conduct? I said, Maestro, many times, but you were the first person I ever saw conduct back in 1937 when I was 6.5 years old, before my 7th birthday. And I remember that concert, and I imitated. I said, I remember when Mr. Kincaid played the flute, and I imitated the wolf call. And he said, I hope that wolf call, that's not the only thing you remember me for. And he was amazing. All those years later, he was still so terrific. And he had that wonderful way of always listening and making the musicians feel they were playing chamber music. He was really way ahead of his time, or right on time, by going for the music. He was kind of unusual, eccentric as a conductor, but he had some fantastic ability to make people feel that they could play. And I asked David Madison, who'd been there, said, no, I said, Stokey, that's what he called him. He said, he never got in the way. He let us play. He made us want to play. And he was there when we needed him. And we always enjoyed the music because he loved the music. And that's the key. When I play with Willie Nelson, he just looks over and smiles at you. Man, you play better than you ever would in your life. When I was playing with Dizzy, he had a certain way of just turning his body and looking at you when you were playing that made you do stuff that you didn't think that you could do. And regardless of the genre of music, the good leaders always do that. I was watching Nenad when he on that beautiful video when he did this stuff with the symphony, and when he did his stuff with all the rock and roll stars and everything. And rather than putting on an act and imitating someone else and looking like he was choreographed by 5 lawyers with drug habits, he was just himself, just like the same guy that I met 36 years ago, just being for real. And when I worked for Sir James Galway, he was the same way. And when I said to him, after I got to know him much better, he was so nice to everybody, including the second violin players in the second section, everybody in the flute section, all the people who came up and said hi to him. He was just cool with everybody. I said, Sir Jimmy, it's so great. Here you are, one of the top grossing artists in the world, and considered to be the premier flutist, and you're cool with everybody. said, bless your heart. And he said, well, David, he said, the part of Ireland I come from, we don't endorse putting on airs. And I said, man, they should put that on the wall of the White House and the Congress and Juilliard and Harvard and every school and every public place. We don't endorse putting on airs. It's not necessary. It's destructive, and it also is bad manners, foul behavior, and a drag.
Hey, personal note directed to both of you. Dave, do you
What?
recall the first time you met? Was that a week into arriving in the United States, Nenad? That you?
It was the first or second week as I arrived.
How did that happen? What was the occasion?
Bradley's, I think I went to Bradley's. And also in the first month I met Richie Havens as well, which I performed with him later, and he sang on my. So in the first month I met a number of people who made impact on me, and
You stayed connected. At least the people still alive.
yeah, all good second bus boys. I met.
What year was that, Nenad? What year?
It was 1984.
84.
I arrived September 29th.
And I know that Nora Guthrie mentions, like, you guys met, was it on an airplane? And was it at that early stage?
We met at the Grammy Awards. We met at the Grammy Awards. We didn't talk to each other because we just noticed each other. And then we met on the same plane that night, red eye.
On a red eye. What year?
Huh.
Well,
It was 1990. You know that the year was when Tears from Heaven from Eric Clapton. That's the year. And let me search the magic of the internet.
a Google search.
Hmm.
See Tears of Heaven.
And then you both have Nora Guthrie in common as a dear friend. And
Yeah.
David, when did you meet Nora? Was that would have been when she was a child, probably?
She was 7 years old.
What was she like?
She had her little dancing bag. She was just taking the dance lesson. She was with her mom, Marjorie, whom I knew, but I didn't know Nora. I'd seen her when she was a baby, but I never, met her because she was like a little toddler. There was this little gal with her little dance bag. And I said, hi, Marjorie. And I was with Ramble and Jack Elliott. And Ramble and Jack was a fantastic, amazing guy, was and still is. And he's 6 months younger than me, and he's still out there playing up a storm, being Jack Elliott like no one else could do. And he said, "Babe, you got to meet this kid. She's going to see something else. That's Marge Woody's daughter, Nora. Nora, say hi to Mr. Amram." So
1992, by the way.
poor Nora. He was just a kid, and Jack probably knew half the people in New York City, so for sure. He had, every time he would go by, she would be introduced to somebody, and she would say, hi. And then, of course, she grew up to be this wonderful, wonderful, amazing person. And her brother Arlo, same thing. Those kids were just all through, and Jody, the three of them. And they had me write a symphony, This Land.
Right.
And it was just a thrill to be able to, because I met Woody, their dad, in 1956, the same month that I met Joe Papp, who was working at CBS, as a floor manager who wanted to have a Shakespeare festival, and everybody thought he was nuts. And also, that's the year I met Jack Kerouac at a Bring Your Own Bottle party in the Village. So it's just kind of like Nemeth describing in New York. You could and still can meet the most amazing people. And I think at that time, it was even easier because there didn't seem to be much of a networking way up into the something or other. It was much kind of seemed like a freer time. It was also a more desperate time and more difficult time. And anybody interested in the arts was so, by definition, on the bottom of the barrel that it was like when I was in the Army or the night I spent in jail once protesting the war, you're very much equal when you're in the can even as a for one day or one night or a day and night, or when you're in the army for 2 years, you're pretty much on an equal footing, and you have to more or less just be yourself and try to understand who you're with. And in a certain way, well, I must say, it was a drag, both situations. I like to play in prisons, but that's because I don't have to live there. And had a wonderful time when I was back in Germany giving some concerts, and I was invited to a military base and saw some of those wonderful young people that are members of the armed forces who were incredible and so nice. And that was really wonderful to see. But I didn't have to stay there. I was able to be a visitor. That was a different thing. But in New York, it was kind of everybody is a stranger, a visitor, an outsider, and on the go, and you might never see them again. So there's a really nice thing. That's why I love that Village Trip Festival that I'm starting to do every year, and so many of the other things that we do. And I got to get out to Queens again and see you and see
Yes.
where Kerouac used to live in Ozone Park.
Yeah, it'd be wonderful. I'm a few miles away, and you have family out here in Queens, isn't that right? Your daughter.
My one daughter lives right on the edge between Brooklyn and
And Queens.
Brooklyn and Queens. She lives on the Queens side, 1 block from Brooklyn.
It has to be Ridgewood.
Live in Brooklyn, and it's really fun being there and being in a borough where they speak over 100 languages.
Yes.
Can't beat that. And that's one of the gems. If anybody from overseas is watching this, and you come to New York City, there are 5 boroughs, and they're all amazing. Even Staten Island, which is not even considered to be part of New York by the intelligentsia. It's pretty fantastic to go there. And Brooklyn is unbelievable now. And the Bronx, which was the home of not only Clifford Odets and so many of the wonderful actors and great athletes that we had, but also all the Afro-Cuban and Latin music and the music from Puerto Rico. That whole explosion of the arts in the Bronx is now coming to fore, and hip hop and rap's founders all Bronx oriented. There's a whole lot, and that makes you appreciate Manhattan much more. So the
But
New
we
York,
shouldn't shortchange Staten Island. They always get shortchanged. You always have a word for every topic. So tell us something. What is the connection of yours of positive vibe towards Staten Islanders?
well, for one thing, until recently, until they had a bridge, you had to take the ferry. So being able to take the ferry ride for a nickel produced a whole generation of people, including me, like Staten Island Ferry and 42nd Street, where you could go to a double feature for $1 and eat at Grant's for $1.50. And so for that, you could have a date and have the most of a movie and a dinner at reasonable prices. Even a near pauper could afford if you were careful, and even leave 50-cent tip. It was so going to Staten Island for a lot of us then was a big thrill just to take that ferry ride. And then when I first came to Staten Island in the 50s, they still had farms, believe it or not. And there was still a lot of people there who considered themselves to be part of a community and whose families had been there like for 100 years. I said, wow, who would believe there's some old working class families right in the boroughs of New York?
One of
Also,
the boroughs of New York City. Yeah.
Fresh Meadows and Queens and places like that still had a few farms left. And it was kind of interesting that specific feeling, some people's grandkids still have a memory of that. And there's also an amazing Italian American community there.
Yes.
And a lot of the people that I knew in the army lived there, and I would go and visit them when I got out. And I saw that there's some people, they say, well, everybody doesn't consider us to be a borough. They kind of had their own thing. And Then there are parts of Manhattan like that, and there are parts of Brooklyn like that. And there are different places all over where if you go there and you pay attention instead of judging beforehand what the label is, the terrific experiences that you can have.
True.
I have to take a shift of the second busboy.
On the Staten Island ferry. Sounds like a good cheap date too. It still is that inexpensive. Doesn't cost you anything to ride
No.
the Staten Island ferry.
Well, it was nice seeing you. And
And I has family obligations there. You're having a good time in Miami?
well, it's just arrived, so it's a different culture. I thought about how weather or climate defines the place actually, because here I walk in a t-shirt in the middle of January, and it's just normal here.
You left the cold of New York. It's
Miami Beach.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
But
have you performed in Miami? You have connections with Miami over the years, David.
Oh, sure. Well, I went to the first grade in Paso Grill, Florida. But we didn't. We usually tried to get down to Fort Myers and go to Sanibel on the boat. That's before they had a bridge. And in Miami, a lot of the Amrams who came from Cuba moved in that area, which so many of the exiles did in the 1960s. And I spent an evening with Ferdy Pacheco, the great trainer of Dr. Ferdy Pacheco, who was from Florida, who was Muhammad Ali's doctor. And a cousin of mine, Amram, from Cuba came. And since she was from Cuba, and he couldn't, he had such a good time speaking Spanish with her because she spoke the same kind that he had learned from his father. But Ferdy was born in the States and had his father was a big time pharmacist, but he had become this amazing, he's an amazing painter and artist and written books in addition to being such a wonderful doctor and being so terrific for the sport of boxing. And he left because he just didn't want to see Muhammad Ali get hurt anymore. Muhammad Ali, of course, being proud and manipulated, kept going on too long. But Ferdy was so much fun to be with. And the night that the Dolphins won, no, it was their baseball team won the World Series, and I was at his house. So my cousin drove me back, and she said, "Man, I'm really sorry." I said, "No," I said, "This gives me an extra 2 hours to practice my Spanglish." And everybody was jumping up and down in the cars. The city was going wild because their baseball team had won the World Series. But I enjoyed being there, and I was at Florida International University doing a bunch of programs. And I also played at the old place, the Tobacco. It's not there anymore. It was the place that the oldest remaining sort of jazz nightclub in America had finally closed down. And that was the place that Al Capone had started, and it was still going. Tobacco Road, I think the name of it is, I should remember. It was so much fun, and we were playing that music, and it just felt so good to be there in an old place. And the extraordinary musicians now that come from there, I was asked when I was at university to mentor these young Cuban Americans. They were Americans born in America, but they were Cuban families, and they all played that music. Man, I was with these guys. They were playing some guaguancos and things that I said, man, I should be studying with you guys. They had some stuff. I said, nah, we listened to the radio. I said, you got to go down and visit and see what the guys down there are doing now. And sure enough, when I did go back 2 years ago, I saw they were right. They're like scarifyingly terrific musicians who also, and when Marsalis went down there and made one of the best records he ever made, or that I've ever heard, where he and the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, who are monster good musicians, were playing with all these monster good Cuban musicians. And was that ever beautiful to hear? So Miami's an extraordinary place. And I remember someone saying, "Oh, you're going down there. That's not like being in America." I said, "That's really like being in America."
Right.
I said, "Here's a whole place
Exemplifies.
like
Yes.
all of us that comes us somewhere else, and instead of complaining and whining, they dig it and they love it."
David,
Yeah.
such a small world moment back in September after the Village Trip Festival at the end. I was after the Bitter End concert, Doug Yeager and Murray Weinstock, a few friends, and we're sitting at a table on, it was near Bleecker Street, and people next to us heard us talking, and they heard David Amram. Suddenly the gentleman says, "I'm a musician and David's going to be playing in Florida in the spring. I think we got a date for him."
Well,
In the middle of Manhattan, in the middle of nowhere, there's people sitting next to us. Tell us this.
there's supposed to be 3 of them, I think, in March, I believe, and I just pray that
Oh, yes.
we'll be able to get down there and do the one with Dick Hyman, who I met the 3rd week in New York back in 1955, who's as terrific as a musician as any of us would like to be. And then we're going to do something at the Opera House that we were supposed to have done, postponed twice because of Cyrus the virus. And then I was going to do one for Lenny and David Engels, who have a series, and then another one at the Palladium in St. Petersburg, where I lived close by in Paso Grill as a little boy before I heard the Philadelphia Orchestra back in the early 30s. And those 3 just all came up as a miracle, and they're one after the other. I'm happy to do the drive, and just did a recent one with Jose, who we did he read his wonderful poem about Charlie Parker playing just in the Village just before he died. And Jose Pacheco, terrific poet, who was, and I've also played, conducted symphony concerts there and done a lot of stuff. But it's a wonderful place. The whole Southland is quite amazing, and also branded. And a lot of people in New York say, "Oh, you're going down south." I said, "Well, my family, on my dad's side, landed in the port of Savannah, and I still have relatives there. And when I went to visit, I went to the temple that my great grandfather and great grandfather were members of. They still have their names up there, and all the relatives still remember all that stuff. And the rabbi turned to me and he said, "Well, David Amram," he said, "welcome home, son."
A real Southern Yiddish accent.
I said, "I wish someone up north would say that." And he said, "Well, you wait a long time and it probably never happened."
Hey, the art of hangoutology. I mentioned the name
It's
Murray
like-
Weinstock. And there's Murray Weinstock. Hey, Murray,
Hey,
just appeared.
good to see you guys. Happy New Year to all of you.
Happy
We
New
started
Year.
1 hour earlier.
Weekend.
We started 1 hour earlier. David, let's make an attempt to go to Cuba, because I have been invited now. So let me see. Would you go to Cuba if the
There's another.
you were right?
I'd love to. It's just being there is so amazing. And also the thing is, never to see that the young musicians somehow, even though people are just barely hanging on, they play music. They love to play together. They play well. They fix their own instruments if they have to, and they never complain and whine about, we should have more or you have too much. It's hard to explain that spirit. And when I saw that, I said, man, people have that spirit,
Spirit
that's
of gratitude.
what counts. And a lot of people have that spirit here too. So all the good spirited people have to find a way to
Right.
get together and not allow ourselves to be discouraged by what creeps we're told we are or how creepy we're supposed to be in order to be well adjusted. And once you understand that, then you can seek out people with good spirits anywhere and everywhere. And rather than being judgmental, or thinking up front, this is second rate, this is worthless, this is bad, same people, snobbishness, that mental illness called snobbishness really is something that doesn't allow you to find the finer things in life. You miss almost all the finer things in life by being snobbish.
David, I have a title for your next volume of because it's an ongoing thing with you with the autobiography. You're up to like the second or third volume, I understand.
Yeah.
I think there should be the subtitle, "The Art of the Second Busboy."
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Remember this phrase.
I can certainly name a chapter that. And since
A chapter. Okay, a chapter, we'll take it.
since I'm writing it, and then I already could write a whole chapter just about of all the experiences.
That experience, David, yeah, in the
And
20-year-old in
snub,
Tennessee.
snub, not that you be not snubbed.
Sorry, that was a great story.
Instead of saying,
Oh.
judge not that ye be not judged, you could say, snub not that ye be not snubbed.
Or to rhyme, snub knot
That
to
ye,
the club.
it is?
Snub knot club.
Oh,
Maybe.
Or the how to become a first busboy, not from second to first.
right.
Right, that's the first busboy. That's
Career boost.
That's a great idea. And then it also would be fun. It would be fun up front to welcome people into thinking, oh, God, that would make sense rather than I was not appreciated or I'm so sensitive, my feelings were hurt. No one wants to hear about that.
right.
I was given, and then I'll let Murray speak because he's an interesting person. But when I was with Oscar Pettifer's band, we were at Birdland. I think I told you this one, Nemeth, probably 15 or 16 times. And Jimmy Cleveland is a great trombone player. It was just probably a year or two older than me, but much more sophisticated and knowledgeable. And I was sitting there, and because we were at Birdland, we always got there early just to hang out. I said, Jimmy, my girlfriend left me. She doesn't think I have a future at all. She's probably right. And my landlord hates me because I'm paying so little rent. And then no one wants to hear jazz French horn, and no one wants to hear symphony music with melody, harmony, counterpoint. Whine, whine, complain, whine, boo-hoo, pity me, whine, whine. And he was listening to all this whining and like the amen chorus every 3 minutes saying, mm-hmm. I hear you. Also, I didn't realize. I hope to God he stops soon. But anyway, he was so nice. He said, finally, he said, Dave, he said, let me pull your coat to something. That pull your coat was an old expression meaning to give you some good advice. I said, please, Jimmy. He said, quote, don't put your business in the street. Wham! What a great mantra that they don't teach you, just like James Galway is telling me in Ireland, where I come from, we don't endorse putting on airs. Just one of those little things you can apply the rest of your life. Or I won't take requests from the second busboy, a little gem.
We are all second busboys. Welcome to the fraternity.
All of those things, and what Jimmy was telling me was basically no one wants to hear you. So years later, when our place burnt down, the New York Times was interviewing me, and I was living over an auto body shop till I could get, and my family was living in someplace else. Man, it was it was life. What happens in life? And this woman, was sort of saying, "Boo hoo, poor Leonard Bernstein Jr. living over an auto body shop must be miserable." She kept saying, "Aren't you angry at the fire
Oh,
department, or aren't you angry at this or that?" Or
I
she
get
was
you.
expecting me to be complaining, and then in the middle of it, the place we were underneath this big explosion, and then turning on all the machines, and they were starting to sand down one of the cars they were refinishing.
And
So
that's loud.
all the chemicals that they were coming came right up through, and you could smell the whole place smelled
Oh,
like a
jeez.
death chamber. And I could see in her face, she was saying, "Poor Leonard Bernstein Jr. is going to perish in this hovel." And she said, "Don't you feel terrible about all this?" And I said, "Look, my wife and my children are alive and healthy. I'm still doing what I love to do. I've been very lucky in my life. This is a setback, and I'll keep on going." I said, "If you want to hear someone sing the blues, I'd recommend buying a Bessie Smith record." And so after that, then she went downstairs to the guy who owned the garage, and he said, "Hey," he said, "he got a poster with Willie Nelson. He plays with everybody for nothing. He's a nice guy. He could stay here for nothing for years if he wants to. We like him. He's a good guy."
Oh,
All right.
that counts. Yeah.
And she was shocked. And then I ended up getting this fantastic 2 or 3 page write-up in the Times. It was better. I didn't need an I didn't need an obituary,
Right.
because I already had the greatest write-up. But that was because she was a very good writer, but I think she just got exhausted. I positived her out. So I realized sometimes not whining and complaining and allowing yourself to be put in the sewer that the person you're with assumes that you belong in, while it's contrary to what we're told by career counselors is a wise move, sometimes turns out to be better. Just a thought for all you folks watching. So if you have a good feeling and a good thought, hang on to that. Don't be talked out of what you have to offer by someone giving you advice that has nothing to offer except to repeat the negative advice that made them the sourpusses that they've become.
Just for record, is there a third busboy or not?
Third busboy?
Does it exist or no?
Now, is this part of busboyology?
No,
Almost.
I was talking before you came on, Murray, about being a second busboy at this place and asking this famous cocktail piano player if he could play a piece, and he said, "I don't take requests from the second busboy." And that gave me a sense of what it was like not only being on the bottom of the barrel in the restaurant business, but also being in the bottom of the barrel in general, or being with people who considered that there was a barrel with the top and the bottom, and that if you were in the bottom, you belonged there, and because of that, you were worthless.
Well, at least he didn't ask you to play it in F sharp,
Murray, you have experience performing that way. Have you ever had a second busboy come over and make a request? I wonder how you would handle it.
Well, kindness is not a weakness, you see. Kindness is not a weakness. David would talk to the second busboy and ask him where is he from and what his aspirations are, and encourage him to do what they do. Because he did the same thing with me. I was like a busboy meeting David Amram for the first time. He had no idea who I was, but he paid attention to me, great attention to pay to me. So it's who you are. It doesn't matter what you're educated, what your family is from. It's your DNA. It's your soul that responds.
And your willingness to share.
Correct. And listen, to have 2 ears and one mouth, for a reason.
Well, I never heard that, but I dig it.
So
Yeah.
Well, take requests. Murray, so you would be kindly. I'm sorry that I haven't heard you perform your gigs over on was it 37th Street over the last couple of years, Murray, where you were doing your regular gigs?
I had a gig at a Japanese restaurant.
Yes.
That was really terrific. And my good friend John Miller, who's a bassist and contractor, would come over there, and it was every Monday night. And we had different people and come and sit in with us. And it was a Japanese restaurant because the owner, his daughter was taking lessons. So she practiced during the day. And on Monday nights, we just I would do like a Nina Rota medley there because I love Nina Rota. And, different people would come. And we had one night, we had a woman, Korean singer who, she was very, very popular. And I said, would you like to sing a Korean song? And she said, no, I just want to sing New York, New York. So I accompanied her, and it was bone chilling. We had such a good time, and it's still a good song. I gotta say, it grabs you.
Yeah.
So I need to go to see my family, which is waiting for me.
In
No,
Miami.
really?
And that's in Miami, Murray. This is
In Miami.
broadcast.
Sorry, we started 1 hour earlier.
I apologize for being late.
Well, it's hangoutology. You just show up when you show up.
Yeah.
I was celebrating having a low like 110/70 blood pressure, and I just thought I'm
Great.
going out strong with Doug Yeager. We
Oh,
walked.
I thought you might be out walking.
Yeah,
through the
we
Central
did
Park
that.
walk.
That's why I was late.
As long as that's important to
It's
have.
great to- yeah. Good health.
Yeah,
Yeah.
congratulations.
The new year.
That's good news.
This is Hangoutology program, and we did it 7 times in a row, 7 months, by the way.
Right.
So that's a sort of success. I want to report to you that people from like Buenos Aires, Tokyo, a number of people who actually watch this and discuss what we talk about. So it's not completely in vain, and it was recognized by people that I think that they are intellectuals and smart people, and somebody's listening, and somebody will be listening in the future.
Well, we got a good vibe here.
So it's a good vibe. And next month, it'll be the shortest month of the year, but it's a Tuesday, the first Tuesday. And you're going to have us on board again, I hope, Nenad.
I'm joining the Busboy Club.
The Busboy Club. Second Busboys.
Yeah.
But since you're international, I just wanted to play a 30-second
Oh,
second Busboy
salute.
friends whom I haven't seen since 2002, I guess it was.
Was it Busboy Soliloquy?
I was in Chengdu, China. Learned to say Wahong Gao Shi Lai Dao Chengdu. I'm happy to be in Chengdu, and I hope I can get back. And for anyone over there, and for everyone here and wherever you are. That's the one instrument, the hulose, that comes over on the Zoom frequency without getting destroyed. Just a beautiful instrument. And like so many things I've learned, just my thank you. My heart goes out. And I know the people in China are struggling too, but we here all love you, and politics, schmolitics will be appreciating your 7,000-year-old culture. And all of us here in the so-called New World, we have some cultural stuff too that we'd love to share with you and continue learning from you in exchange for that. And that goes for everybody. And I just want to thank you, Nenad, for all the stuff that you're doing constantly your whole life. And the same with you, Michael, and my man Murray too. All of us are at the University of Hangoutology, so we
Doing
can.
our second fiddle fight.
And I'm so glad to hope, and I hope with all the people who have written you from overseas, that's overseas from the U.S., where we're just that one spot on the globe. Maybe some of the folks in the United States will get to watch this too, because we may be global thinkers, but we didn't forget where we live.
Good message is timeless. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, good night, everybody. Thank you for joining. And
Stay safe. Enjoy your stay in Miami. Nenad.
we see each other on February, first Tuesday of February.
Absolutely.
Which I
Wonderful.
quickly, if you want. It will be February 1st.
Wow.
Great.
February 1st. Yeah.
Good way to start the month.
Yeah. Okay.
Good time in
Okay.
Miami.
Maestro David, Murray, Nenad.
Good night. Good night,
Good
everybody.
night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Happy New Year again.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
2002.
Bye.
Bye-bye.